Hello, everyone. Good morning to you. Good morning to those of you following us here on the webinar and to those of you following us on Facebook Live. It is a pleasure to be here. It is our California Portuguese-American Coalition CPAC annual summit, a little bit different this year than we are normally accustomed to, which is a get together in the state's capital. But last year we had to, of course, scrap everything. And the last thing that the California State Assembly wanted to do was worry about a resolution. And so there were lots of other issues to deal with in the beginning of June of last year. And so this year we are back with it virtually, and hopefully next year we'll be in person in Sacramento. So we want to, first of all, thank each and every one of you for your support. Thank the Luso-American Development Foundation, that's FLAD in Lisbon, for their sponsorship, and thank the Portuguese Beyond Borders Institute, PBBI, at Fresno State for their partnership as well. We have a full day of events. It starts now and it will continue on until about 2 o'clock. Every single hour we'll have different panel or different conversations. And so we hope that you can join us until 2 o'clock. If you cannot, join us whenever you can. The Zoom works at all the different times. And of course, we'll be carrying these live on Facebook, but we'll also be archiving these. This will be part of the PBBI Portuguese-American Oral History Project that is archived at the Henry Madden Library at Fresno State. Because the history of the Portuguese presence in California isn't just the immigrant who came over, whether he or she came over 20 years ago, 50 years ago, or 120 years ago. It is also of the first, the second, and the third generation who continues to build Portugal in a different manner in California. And we're very happy to start off with a good friend. Lee Neves is with us. Lee, I'm going to have him introduce himself, but he has been with the California Portuguese-American Coalition since the first summit. He was at the first summit. He's been at every one of them since then. He was at a Palcas CPAC event on a panel here in October of 2019, our last live event. And so we're happy to have them now in a different capacity. At that time, he was a consultant. Getting people elected, and now he is running the show at one of the assembly offices in Sacramento. So first and foremost, Lee, welcome. Thanks for taking time.
Denise, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure and looking forward to it.
Well, we want you to headline this, and we're going to start with asking you. I know that a lot of people on here, who is on Facebook that doesn't know who Lee Neves is? But I mean, if you're a Portuguese American and involved in politics, you know where Lee Neves is and who he is, unless you've been under a rock. But a lot of people, of course, are not in the political world. And a lot of people, are in different parts of the country also following this summit. So give us a little bit of a bio, if you don't mind.
So Lee Neves, age 45, here in lovely California, born and raised in California. My parents, meus parentes, Francisco and Natalia Neves, came here from Terceira after they were married. My mom is from Feiteira, and my dad, as he likes to say, é do Antigo Vila da São Sebastião, in Terceira. And really just grew up in the valley. You know, we had a dairy in Oakdale, then moved to Hillmar. And from there, I went to undergrad and law school at the University of the Pacific, and got bit with the political bug pretty early on. And all my friends I graduated law school with went to go be lawyers, and I went into politics, which I'm sure made my mom very happy. But and kind of been on that path ever since. I've run campaigns not only up and down the state of California, all the way from Del Norte County down to Palm Springs, but also in Utah, Pennsylvania, places like that. I've been involved in politically, so it's been a fun ride. And here I am in the state capitol now, as the Chief of Staff for Assemblymember Carlos Villapudua, out of Stockton for the 13th Assembly District. I guided his primary and general election campaigns. We definitely were the underdogs. People didn't expect us to win, but we did end up winning, and we played harder and smarter, as they like to say. So we're up here in Sacramento right now, having a great time and getting things done.
Fantastic. And I'm sure the reason the underdog got there was because they had a good political consultant, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, good. Let's talk a little bit about the political consultant aspect. You have been involved in some famous races. One of the famous races, of course, that is associated with you was the race that there was actually two Portuguese Americans running against each other for Congress, and that is actually the first race that we've had that we know of that had two Portuguese Americans running against each other. Your candidate didn't make it, but quite almost made it. It was a very close call. It was actually very close. It was a recount, and it was a very slim, razor thin margin. And then you also have, as you said, campaigns in other parts of the state and other parts of the country, and you've done some political consulting with local and regional. And when I mean local and regional, like people for mayors and for board of supervisors. And we don't normally, Lee, associate that with political consultants. I mean, it's like, okay, you want to run for a mayor of a city. Los Angeles is different, but I mean, a mayor of Tulare or mayor of Sears or some of these small communities, basically go get some yard signs, put it all over, knock on a few doors, and away you go. That's the old style, isn't it? That's not what happens anymore. So tell us a little bit about how that's evolved, because I know that you can't just run a campaign like that.
No, especially from last year with COVID and whatnot. But as the population has become more digitally and tech savvy, that has allowed people like myself to be able to really cut up populations and target them. And you have a message and you target a select subgroup of voters. So instead of just the shotgun approach, it used to be, I'm good, he's bad, I want to cut your taxes, he wants to increase your taxes. We can really, zero in on, okay, that if someone lives in Mountain House, for example, there's a tax they may be in favor of, which would be a tax that they know is going to go to fund their streets and roads because they commute to the Bay Area all the time. So especially with the advent of Facebook, or as my mom likes to call it in her Portuguese English, the Facebook. But it really lets us go into an area like, let's say, Mayor of Stockton. And so I could take everyone who's on Facebook in Stockton, and if they like, if they're described as conservative or liberal, I can then break it down from there. If they are commuters, I can literally take a subset of people who are just commuters and just target them. So it's really become a lot more specialized. It has given underdogs a greater ability to compete, because on social media, digitally, you don't need the ad buys you do to be on TV, for example. And I'll use a perfect example. So in my state assembly race, where now Assembly Member Carlos Villalpudua won, we had what's called an independent expenditure. So it's basically an outside group that wants one candidate to win or lose, and they run ads for that candidate, but they can't talk to the campaign. They have to. There can be no coordination at all. And so we had one that got close to $2 million. Vice versa, our opponent had this very wealthy guy from the Bay Area funnel a lot of money from his friends into her, so she was able to somewhat keep up money wise. But her advantage is they can decide what to do with that money, as to where we were at the mercy of the independent expenditure saying, this is what we're going to do, and you guys are going to find out about it when it first pops up on TV or in the mailboxes. So it really gives underdogs and underfunded campaigns a fighting chance to be able to do that very niche targeting, and really be a lot smarter with the way they spend their money.
So building upon and picking your brain as a political consultant before we transition over to the state capital, Portuguese Americans, Americans of all ethnicities, Californians of all ethnicities, but of course we focus on Californians who have, some connection to Portugal. And I like that the Facebook that your mom uses because, hey, George W. Bush used to call it the internets, remember? So, if he can call it the internets, we Portuguese can call it the Facebook. But what I wanted to pick your brain a little bit on as a political consultant is, so as someone who is of Portuguese background and is thinking about running for a local office, and we've done a pretty good job, because we're only 350,000 in California. We're spread all over. They're not just in Hilmar and Tulare. We have Portuguese in Arcata, as and San Diego and everywhere. And we got nearly 140 Portuguese Americans in elected office, and that's not probably a true count, as you know, Lee, because a lot of people don't have the Neves last name or the Borges last name. They have, a name that, their mom married, someone, of a different ethnicity. And they have, Hernandez or Smith or Jones or Prokowski or anything like that. And so we have more than 140, we know. What are some of the, without giving, of course, your secrets as a political consultant, what would you tell someone in the Portuguese American community, whether he or she is young or not so young? Because sometimes people decide to run when they're in middle age or when they're, finishing with their careers, and maybe they want to go to a school board, and make a difference on a school board or a water board, which those are very powerful in the Central Valley, or city council in a small or mid-sized city. What are some of the things that you would say as a political consultant? Hey, if you're thinking about running, and you're thinking about running maybe in 2 years or 4 years or whatever, you're thinking about running, there's a couple of necessary steps. Do these first 3 or 4 things before anything else to see if it's something that you really want to do. What kind of pointers would you give to us without charging us anything as a political consultant?
First of all, it's going to take money.
Yeah, okay.
That's just how it is. And you can't be afraid to ask your, friends and family and whatnot. Hey, I'm running for office. I'm asking you. And a lot of times, especially with Portuguese people who are very, we're very proud. We don't like handouts. It's not a handout. It's an investment. They are investing in you to work on behalf of the community, and that's kind of the way it needs to be couched. It's I am asking you to invest in me. It's like if I were to open up a leiteria and go around and get investors in the leiteria because I already have a contract with a cheese company or whatnot. Same aspect applies. It is you are asking them. You're the commodity. You are asking people to invest in you because of A, B, C, and D. Either they align with your values, their friends, their family, and whatnot. Thank you, Anthony Barcelos. I will sit closer to the microphone. There we go. Hopefully that works. And secondly is obviously it's not for shy people. But the one thing voters really like is someone that A, will listen to them, and B, will be able to say, hey, even if you and I don't agree on something, my door is always going to be open. And let's work on what we can agree. One of my old clients, Dick Monteith, the former county supervisor from Stanislaus, would always be like, hey, we don't agree on 85% of things, but there's 15% that we do agree on. Let's work on those first and then build trust from there. So when you're out talking to the population and stating your case, kind of, why I should be elected to school board or city council, you name it, that's, just having that very open mind, being very frank, being very upfront with, this is my thought process, these are my beliefs, this is what I would like to do or like to see happen. And then just always saying that your door is open, and also don't overpromise and underdeliver. My favorite is when someone says, I'm going to go to Washington, or I'm going to go to Sacramento, I'm going to cut your taxes. Well, you're one of 80 up here and one of 435 back in Washington. So good luck making that happen by yourself. Um, it's about working with others. It's, hey, I want to go back to Washington or to Sacramento and work on broadband for everyone. That's one of my goals will be to make that happen. I'm not going to make it happen by myself, but I'm going to work with other people to help make it happen. And I want to be the person from our area that puts that at the forefront as far as the issues that he or she is working on.
So indeed, so it's those are some very good points, and don't be afraid, as you said, to ask for money, because I mean it takes money to, unless you have very deep pockets yourself, it takes money to, and sometimes when someone makes a donation, it's kind of also a commitment they have to your to your cause and to your political career. Is that not true? I mean, even if people who make $50, they believe in you.
Yes, they do. I also do get paid in Masas Vada, so I'm just putting that out there.
And Alcatra, I'm sure. And a good Alcatra. Let me ask you a little bit about, so, the you mentioned something, how the pandemic has changed it, and how, if you're going to go to Sacramento, you're one of 80. If you're going to go to DC, you're one of 435. And that's a very good point, a very good point. Do you think that, as we a little bit of political philosophy that you follow quite a bit, you think as the country changes, California changes as well? Of course, California is a little bit lopsided into one political party, but do you think that people, and especially at the local level and the regional level that you've advised so many in these last few years, whether running for mayor, running for city council, or running for supervisor, is the political affiliation that important at that level?
Yeah, I mean, at this level, yes.
Of course, yeah.
Also,
At the assembly level, certainly, yeah.
yeah.
But
Oh,
at the regional level, at like county
yeah,
offices or state or city offices,
it's starting to get very important. And
really.
that the polarization of the American electorate because of Donald Trump, and you have all these people who just love Donald Trump. I will keep my opinions to Donald Trump to myself because it's a morning program, and that language is only allowed after 11 o'clock on cable.
That's right.
But it really has, you see it, and this is part of what also social media has done. It has, allowed people to live in silence. So you can go join a group or only have friends that are of your like persuasion, and you're not open to or not talking to people of other ideas, where it's, Republican bad, Democrat good, or Democrat bad, Republican good. And so you're really starting to see that, to where you can have someone who has the best ideas, but because they're Republican or Democrat, you won't vote for them because they're in that party. It's that story, in the South way back when they used to have what they call yellow dog Democrats. And it basically came from, there's this candidate form in Alabama. This guy is up there speaking, and this little old lady in front is nodding her head, agreeing with everything that he has to say. So he comes up, he's like, I'm excited to get your vote election day. And she's like, I'm not going to vote for you. He's like, well, why didn't you agree with everything I had to say? And she's like, yeah, but you're a Republican. I'd vote for a yellow dog Democrat. I'd vote for a yellow dog over a Republican. And therefore, it's kind of started to become like that again, to where no matter on what side of the aisle they're on, because they have a different letter after their political affiliation, it's it's out of the question. And it used to not be that way. It used to have people from Dennis Cardoza to Dick Monteith, to Gary Condit. And the one of the last few holdovers is down in the southern part of the valley is Jim Costa,
Yep,
who,
indeed.
You want to talk about tables turning. Here I was, with the campaign against him, and maybe 5 years later, reads does a floor speech in honor of my parents' 50th wedding anniversary on the floor of the House of Representatives, because there was a healthy respect. And my boss, Assembly Member Philip, who was very much the same way. He's able to work with people on both sides, and isn't just because, hey, if you got an R after your last name, it's a horrible idea. Adam Gray, another Democrat from Merced, same way. So yeah, that's kind of how the partisanship has really leaked into local elected office, to where they really push that affiliation and not so much the here's what I'm going to do for the community.
That's very interesting, Lee, because I didn't know it had changed that far as the local and the county as well. And in your perspective, you think that's healthy? Because for so many years we didn't care if the mayor was Republican or Democrat. Hey, he's just a good mayor. But as you said, and that's very wise on your part, that's why you're a political consultant. The polarization that began at the national level, here, with the pre-2016 election. So it has really trickled down, to use a term, an economic term. It has really trickled down to that level. That's interesting.
And anytime you get two people that can have a civil discourse with each other and disagree on policy areas, but still go out for a beer, be friends afterwards. I mean, that's what this country was founded upon. And anytime you drive away from that, it's not healthy. It just isn't. And unfortunately, the past 4 years, pre-January 20th, you had someone as the head of our nation who drove that. I mean, that was his shtick. It's us versus them. And that's not a healthy way to have a democracy. That's not a healthy way to run a country, a city, or a county, or a school. It shouldn't be us versus them. It should be us, period. We have different ideas of how to get there, different priorities maybe, but at the end of the day, we're here because we want to do good. And you kind of see that, steered not so much in that respect during the Trump administration. And luckily, and look, I have some of my best friends who are still very diehard Trump fans, and I just remind them that they lost every day. But it's for all his wars and whatnot, Joe Biden is a nice return to normalcy. I mean, he's like your uncle. And it's nice and it's normal, and you don't have to worry about what he's going to say on Twitter.
Yeah. Well, when we talked to you about being on this, there was a comment that I think you made and other people made. Hey, tune in to Lee, because there's always going to be at least one quotable quote, and here's one already, which is, "Hey, I remind my friends every day he lost." So that's a quotable quote. That's a very. There's a couple other ones, but that one's a very a quotable quote for sure. Lee, a little bit about so. Portuguese-Americans, and the community well. Your mom and dad are very in tune with the community. They're part of the community. You have your ties to and your roots in Terceira show deeply, especially when you go there and you go all over social media and make us feel bad that we're not there with you. But the idea that, of course, that we are at the most 350,000, excuse me, in California. According to the census, we may be a few more because people don't identify, but we're, let's say, around 400,000. So we cannot be a very important voting bloc, quote unquote, when you talk about as far as statewide, because of population of 40 million. And so but we have these 140 elected, and we have 3 members of Congress from the Central Valley, and we have folks such as the member that you work for that respects and that are in tune with the Portuguese American community. When we look at the Portuguese Americans running for office, how important is it for them to make coalitions with other groups? How important is it for Portuguese Americans to understand that you cannot get elected with a Portuguese American vote? For example, I believe in Congressman Costa's district, which well. I think Portuguese Americans are less than 6%, so you can't get elected with that. That helps, but you can't get elected with that 6 or 7% of the vote. So Portuguese Americans, independently of your political persuasion, the only way they can get elected is by forging different coalitions, with all the different ethnicities that compose this melting pot and this multicultural state. So, from your thought, when you're a Portuguese American, do you go look for and you want to run it for public office, do you go look for commonalities that we have with other ethnic groups?
It's all, a lot of it is regional. In regards to, let's take Congressman Costa, for example, who is, the guy has perfected the art form of representing his area the way it's formed and its values and its issues, So he is going to be making, if you are Latino on the west side of Fresno County, it's all about agriculture and water and immigration reform, because so many of the farm workers are non-citizens that come over and you pick your cabbage and tomatoes and whatnot. John McCain had a famous saying once when he was in the 2008 primary, and someone was railing on illegal immigration, needs to stop, blah blah blah. And he's like, well, if you don't want to fix the immigration issue, and you want to pay $13 for a head of lettuce, by all means, go knock yourself out, because that's what we have. So it really is finding the issues that are important in your region. So in the Valley, it's going to be agriculture, it's going to be water, it's going to be immigration, it's going to be small business, it's going to be housing, as the cost of housing skyrockets. Let's take Senator Harry Stern out of the coast. He represents takes in Malibu, for crying out loud. There might be one Portuguese person in Malibu, and it might be the senator. But he is able to form coalitions with people in that district of issues that are important to his district. So it's going to be coastal protection, climate change, environmental values, things like that. So it really is about, not just dictating to your core constituency. It's dictating to your core, I guess I'm going to make up the word, issuancy. There are core issues in each part of the state that override any other issue. In our assembly district here, it's very much transportation, housing, and homelessness. Homelessness always ranks as one of the top issues in our district. We also, the 13th Assembly District, Stockton and Tracy, and let's not forget Thornton, the town of the big festa of Thornton. Yes, we have Thornton.
So Thornton is in your district, is in your Assembly member's district. Interesting.
It is.
My God, you have now the biggest festa in California in your district. We will never hear the end of it now.
But we're also home to the largest amount of super commuters, people who have to commute over 2 hours to work in the United States. So those issues are going to be important. So those are issues we hit on, not only during the campaign, but also while we're in office when we introduced bills and whatnot. They were very, small business friendly bills. We introduced some bills on housing, on homelessness. We introduced bills on agriculture. One of our bills was the pollinator bill for pollination habitat for bees. We asked for 5 million in our bill, and Governor Newsom so very graciously added, made it 30 million in his May budget revise, and it's stayed there so far during the budget negotiations. We're excited about that. But that's something that's going to help a lot of agriculture in our district, because 1 out of every 3 bites of food you eat comes from um, comes from something that was pollinated. So the more we can expand pollination, the better quality of food, the more food we're going to be able to grow. And we are the breadbasket of America. So it really is tackling, he's able to forge coalition. Assemblymember Villapugo is able to form coalitions on issues that are very important in his district, and with legislation that it's not this overarching, broad theoretical. It's very much, once it passes, you can start to see the results right away.
And if we look at some of those issues that you mentioned, that are important to your member, and of course are important to the Valley and throughout the state of California, other than homelessness, which kind of hits everybody everywhere, it seems like, and of course water issues. What are a few other issues that continue to be important throughout the Valley? Are some of the national issues also hitting us locally here in the Valley? I'm talking about racial justice and issues with police reform and issues with some of the national headline issues. Are those issues kind of present here in the Valley? Do you see those as well?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. In fact, we actually have a bill that passed out of the Assembly, is now over in the Senate, Assembly Bill 931, that creates standards for active bystandership. And if people wondering what active bystandership is, George Floyd, you had the one officer who murdered George Floyd, but you had 3 officers standing by not doing anything. And so what this bill does, it implements training for officers for what they should do in that instance, because there's a variety of reasons of why they won't act. One can be a junior officer, just hired doing field training, and that's his field training officer. Well, you're a little intimidated. You don't want to go and say, no, you shouldn't do that. How can you best do that in a way that is within the bounds of the law, and will stop that situation? And here we have a bill, like I said, it has training for active bystandership, for law enforcement officers to kind of A, B, C, and D what they should do if they find themselves in a George Floyd type situation or any situation like that. And it was supported by law enforcement and also by African American clergy. I mean, so two sides you would think would be on opposite ends of any police reform conversation or bill. And here we were able to come up with a very common sense bill that has actual solutions, where everyone agreed that this is something that is needed. And so obviously, Stockton is actually the most diverse city in the United States of America. They actually did a study, and we are the most diverse city, with, Hispanic population, African American, Southeast Asian, Filipino, white, you name it. So those, racial justice, police reform definitely is something that affects our district. Agriculture obviously is something that very much affects our district. Also job creation and infrastructure. One of the things they're talking about in Washington right now is the big infrastructure bill. Well, we have the Port of Stockton, which next to the Port of Portland is the second biggest inland seaport on the West Coast. And so, for us, job creation and infrastructure go hand in hand, especially when you have a Port of Stockton, when you have proposed rail links from the Valley to BART to ease that commute and get 1 out of every 3 cars off of the Altamont. For anyone who's ever gone over the Altamont during rush hour, there are times where you're wondering if life's worth living. It's, you're just stuck literally in the same place for almost 2 hours at a time. So if anything, our assembly district is really a microcosm of America in the breadth of issues we have to cover, the breadth of issues that are important to our constituencies, and the breadth of issues that we work on.
Indeed, and I wanted to mention to those who are following us, especially on social media, sometimes it's hard if you are on a different page. I may not see your comments, but here on the webinar, please, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A or the chat, and I'll be more than happy to pass them on, and Lee can see them as well. And so we'd be more than happy to answer any questions. We have about another 15 minutes or so, so we'll be more than happy to answer any questions from any of you, and do so on social media. We'll try to follow those as well. Lee, a little bit about you mentioned, of course, the some of the issues and some of the involvement at a state level. People forget that we do have 80 assemblymen in the states, but quite to the contrary of some states. It is a full-time job, and they have a full-time staff. It isn't something that they show up, for 40 days out of the year, and they represent a hellacious amount of people compared to some districts in some House state representative offices in some states where there's like half of the population. They have over 150 assembly members. So tell us a little bit about you've just talked about the cultural and the ethnic part of your district that your member represents. Tell us a little bit about how many people, what is the average number of represented that a assembly person in California represents? Because that, for those who are following, maybe we have people following us in Lisbon and in the Azores, and also in the East Coast of the United States. And that might surprise them a little bit, because sometimes people think, that, for example, in the Azores, the regional assembly has 57, actually 57 deputados or deputies. And so, and the whole archipelago has a population of 250,000. So, you may represent just a couple thousand people. That's not the case here in the California Assembly, because, as we said, it would be the fifth most important economy if it was an independent country. And so an assembly person represents a few people, right?
So on average, we represent roughly 425,000 people.
Wow.
That is between 425, 450 is how many we represent. So basically, if you take the, city of Stockton, city of Tracy, and the other outlying areas, we have like a small little sliver of Lodi. I want to say 3 precincts. And obviously Thornton, which I think is 300 people.
A little bit more.
A little more on Festa weekend.
On Festa weekend's about 30,000. That's true.
But it's, it really is it's a lot of people we represent, and a lot of constituencies, and a lot of groups with their pet issues.
How do you get folks engaged? Okay, so I mean, I know that you probably don't want to hear from every single one of the 425,000 constituents at one time, but how do you stay engaged? How does the assembly member and you, with chief of staff and your entire staff, how do you stay engaged? With 450,000 people, or
so
with the community.
We have a district office staff of 4 permanent. That are out in the community, either working with members of the community right now, especially EDD cases. Every assembly office really is just dealing with the backlog and the disaster that is EDD, and everyone agrees that it's a department that needs to be worked on and fixed, but it needs to be done so on the fly, because we can't just say, okay, we're going to close the EDD department for 6 months while we figure this out. Well, all the people need their unemployment checks, especially due to the COVID pandemic. So, but also going out to various events. Perfect example, this past Saturday, we along with San Joaquin County, had a COVID vaccination clinic in North Stockton, this place called Sandman Park, which is a usually underserved area of the county, of the city of Stockton. And so we were up there. We ended up vaccinating over 100 people in 4 hours. Well, not we. I wasn't the one sticking the needle in them, but it was the professionals. But we helped arrange it and whatnot. And so it's being at things like that. Going out to community events, be it a Chamber of Commerce ribbon cutting, or an award ceremony for Teacher of the Year, things like that, where we're out in the community, they're out in the community representing the assembly member as his representative, and being able to talk to people in the community while they're out at those events. And so that's, how, and we put a real heavy focus on representing the assembly member locally. A lot of people think, well, the only thing you do once you're in the state assembly or state senate is you go to Sacramento and you pass stuff. No, in reality, it's us helping out a lot of our constituents. Writing letters of support if you're a nonprofit that is applying for a grant. Doing things like that. Working. We had yesterday. We hosted with Google a webinar free of charge to our constituents about how to advertise your small business on Google. How to get it listed and all that fun stuff. In March, we had a webinar on grant writing, where we had a professional grant writer come in. If you are a nonprofit, basically went through Grant Writing 101. In about a week, we're going to have a webinar on financial literacy. So, ages 18 and up, especially those, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds. It's, here's why it's important to keep good credit. Here's a good time to start saving for retirement, kind of like, financial health 101, basically, you can call it. So it's really providing a lot of services to our district. One of our favorite things we've been doing since schools have started opening up is dropping off coloring books for third grade classes. How a bill becomes law. It's almost like that old Schoolhouse Rock. I'm just a bill on Capitol Hill. And it's a coloring book, but they also learn how a bill goes through the legislative process in obviously third grade speak. So it really is, with each assembly office, a very dedicated group of staffers that are out there representing their boss day in, day out on issues that, not the super sexy issues you see up here in Sacramento, but issues that probably affect your average person more than anything that happens up here in Sacramento.
And as we come up on the end, we don't have any questions so far, but a couple of other things I'd like. How do you, how important as a political consultant, of course, and now as someone running a assemblyman's office and chief of staff, how important is that you hear from the constituents? In other words, besides all the outreach that you just mentioned, tons of things that you do, how important is it for actually, if a constituent is concerned about something, an issue, how important is that they actually sit down and write, say, an email or a letter to their assembly person or to their state senator, expressing that? Or is that letter just go in the trash?
No, actually, what happens is when you send a letter in, we have a back office system where we're able to track the amount of support and oppose, either letters, phone calls, emails, mostly emails, obviously,
right,
on a bill. And a perfect example I will give you is a bill that came up last week that died, Assembly Bill 1139, that had to do with the subsidy for people that have solar on their houses. And this bill wanted to do away with that because a lot of people viewed it as your more high-end areas, you're being able to take advantage of the subsidy, and your more impoverished rural areas like the Valley not being able to take as much advantage of that subsidy. And we had well over 100 people, and we log it. We actually log it in. So when we do our bill analysis, and myself and our legislative director and our staff up here in Sacramento are going over with the assembly member on the legislation, it literally will show on our analysis. This is how many people from our district are in favor. This is how many people from our district that are opposed. The one thing I would definitely urge on that is it carries a lot more weight if we can tell that this is actually a concern of yours. So many times you get people who they get a blast email sent out,
Mm-hmm.
and they cut and paste and they email it. That takes 30 seconds. That's just like, oh, this is a good idea, send it off, instead of actually, really driving home the point of this is why this bill is important. And, the more of those we get on a bill, the more we are going to be swayed that this is something our district wants or does not want.
And we have, of course, I know you're a very proud Portuguese American and a very proud Azorian American and Terceiran American, all that stuff. And I imagine you still keep, though you're in Sacramento, spending most of your time, but you still keep in touch with Hilmar and your parents, and of course the community there. What's the one of course the issues is everything nowadays. I used to tell my students, you can be local but think globally, and so everything is interconnected. And the Azores, where you have your roots and your parents and myself came from, and lots of folks who are following us, Madeira as well, and mainland Portugal. But there is of course this strong bond and a strong connection. At a statewide level, there is a sister state relationship between the Azores and the state of California. Do you see some future prospects with technology, with the things that are being done positively in Portugal and the Azores, such as wind energy and things like that? Do you see some future prospects that we can maybe even have some common projects?
Yeah, so and it's funny you brought up wind energy, and one thing that they're really advocating here in California is offshore wind, off the coast of California as another form of clean energy. Obviously, it's much windier off the coast, so it's not going to be like those windmills you see driving over the Altamont, which some days are spinning, some days aren't. But I think a lot of it also is in trade. The more interconnected and globally we get, obviously Azores is the pit stop right in the middle of the Atlantic, and we are the breadbasket of the world. So it's building that relationship as to where we have these kind of intermodal, be it air, shipping, rail, and whatnot, but having flights from Europe to the Azores to California, and especially our district, because we have the Stockton Metropolitan Airport, which is, well, it does have some passenger flight service. A lot of it is a lot of freight cargo, and it is so close to that port of to the port of Stockton, so you literally can have a shipment from China, stop off in Stockton, get off on the rail hub in Stockton, rail it over to the Stockton airport, and have it fly over to Terceiran, to the old American air base out there, and so that kind of interconnectivity is something that obviously we'd like to see more of, because it expands opportunities not only for people here in California and in our district, but also back in the Azores.
Lee, we're just about out of time. I want to thank you for taking time. I want to thank the assembly member for allowing you also to take time. Thank you. Thank him, of course, for his service. And let me ask you one question for people who are following us in different parts of the United States and as I said, Portugal, the Azores, a couple of people following us as well. The election. So the assembly member was your assembly member was just elected a few months this last election round, right? And what is the term, and are there term limits? Explain a little bit about
So yeah, so you can serve in the state legislature, both houses, a grand total of 12 years. So
okay.
for example,
And elections are every 2 or every 4?
For state senators every 4, for state assembly every 2. So a perfect example is our state senator, Susan Eggman. She served 8 terms in the state assembly, and she was just elected to Senate. So she can serve 1 term, 1 4-year term in the Senate, because that would be 12 years total, 8 years in the assembly, 4 years in the Senate. So it used to be the old term limits was 6 years in the assembly, 8 years in the Senate. And they kind of they reconfigured it to where if we wanted to, we could spend all 12 years in the state assembly, or you could spend 8 years in the Senate and 4 years in the assembly, or 4 years in the assembly, 8 years in the Senate. It just provides for a lot more continuity,
Mm-hmm.
a lot more knowledge base with those members who have been here. It really creates for a better process.
But it's tough to be elected every 2 years. I know Congress, of course, is the same thing. Do you ever see a movement? Well, as a political consultant, you probably want them to be elected every 2 years. I mean, but that's not your position now. But do you ever see a movement for that to change to every 4 years? Because it seems like you just got elected.
I think that's a horrible idea. Horrible idea to be.
Another quotable quote. Yes, of course, from a political consultant aspect. But it just seems like you've just finished being elected, and then you're sworn into office, and you better start fundraising. Because you better start running again, because I mean, it's going to come up in a little over 18 months. Full campaign.
Think of all the people that we're employing in TV and radio stations, and guest actors in our commercials. I mean, it's really it is really a great job creator. I will leave it at that.
Okay, so there's some pluses from an economic standpoint, but of course, from a member standpoint, I'm sure that he or she would like to have a little bit of a pause, from that. That's a good way to end it, indeed. So again, thank the Assemblyman, and thank you for your time. As you know, we have a resolution coming up tomorrow. We hope the Assemblyman is part of it, and it's a long resolution and very, very tailored to the Portuguese-American community. And we would, of course, be very grateful in the California Portuguese-American Coalition-CPAC and all of the Portuguese organizations, fraternal organizations, church organizations. Everyone would be very, very thankful if the Assemblyman is part of that as well.
Rumor has it somebody I know may be writing his talking points for that, and stating that Terceira is the greatest island on the face.
I don't know. I don't know who that person would be, and who would talk about.
I'm trying to figure it out.
Okay, and I don't know who would be talking about Terceira being the greatest Portuguese place on earth, although that's probably right. And from your dad's point of view, Vila de São Sebastião, of course, is the
antique Vila de São Sebastião.
That's right, Antiga Vila de São Sebastião. Well, thank you so much, Lee. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your work. Thank you for all you've done. I mean, as you mentioned in the beginning, you've had a long, but you're young, career in public service and in the electoral process, which is such a cornerstone for our democracy. And that's why I'd like to end by asking you that question. I mean, sometimes we take this for granted. Portuguese people should not take this for granted. We lived under a dictatorship of Salazar and then Marcelo Caetano Dian for almost 50 years. So we should not take democracy for granted. It isn't, as many said, including the past President Obama, it isn't a spectator sport. It is something that people need to be involved in. So what would you tell all of our Portuguese Americans throughout California, whether they want to run or not for office? We obviously want more of them to run, but get involved in the political process.
Just vote. And when you vote, be knowledgeable on the issues. You don't got to spend an entire day studying up on them, but at least be able to read through them and get the general gist of what you're voting for. But I would say just vote, because those who don't vote can't complain.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much, Lee. I appreciate it.
I want to say one quick hello. I'm sure my friend Miguel Vaj is.
Oh, yes, he probably is on. Flat is on. That's right. Yes.
Probably taking a selfie as we speak. And I know you have Supervisor Josh Pedrozo up next.
Yes.
On one of your panels.
Yes.
Great supervisor. However, his choice of consultants is a little sketchy.
Oh, I take it. Okay. All right. That's another quotable quote. Yes, he's coming up next at 11 o'clock. We have another panel starting. Thank you so much, Lee. We appreciate it. We know you have to go. Take care.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. And so that was Lee Neves from the State Assembly, now a Chief of Staff, and been a political consultant for many years, involved in various aspects of the Portuguese-American community, and a great conversation to kick off the California Portuguese-American Coalition 2021 Summit. We are going to have a panel starting here basically in about 5 minutes or so. And so we hope that you'll stick around with us. If you do have to, those of you who are on the Zoom webinar, as we mentioned, it's the same link. So if you, of course, don't want to see one session and want to see another one, you can always log on and log off any particular time that you'd like to do that. I want to thank some of the Televisão Portuguesa de Califórnia, TVP, for being a partner on this as well and live streaming. So thank you to João Manuel Dias, Diaspora Media Group, and the Televisão Portuguesa de California for live streaming the California Portuguese-American Coalition 2021 Summit. I want to thank all of you who are on here on the webinar. I want to thank the Honorable Consul General of Portugal in San Francisco, Maria João Lopes Cardoso, who is also in attendance. And different people from different parts of the valley, different parts of the state. Some of our board members, board member Idalmiro de Rosa is also in attendance. We want to thank him for being in attendance as well. And all of you from different parts of the state and different parts of the country, and all of you who are following us on social media as well. We're going to pretty much go to the next segment here really quick. And we will probably go off of social media for just a little bit, but we'll be right back with that as well. And so we will continue in this conversation here as we promote the Portuguese-American presence in a public office. So those of you following us on social media, we're going to probably stop the presentation now, and as far as the recording as well, we'll kick that up in a little bit. So thank you all for joining us, and continue those of you here on the Zoom webinar